The morning coffee on Kepler 442b tasted like recycled despair with hints of industrial lubricant, which meant it was actually an improvement over yesterday's batch. Captain Riley Novak took another sip from his dented metal cup and surveyed the cratered landscape that had become home for the past 18 months, wondering if the Terran Defense Corps recruitment posters had mentioned anything about extended camping trips on planets where the local wildlife consisted primarily of things that exploded when you looked at them wrong. Contact bearing 270, Sergeant Vera Chen announced from her sniper's nest, her voice crackling through the comm system with the casual tone of someone reporting weather conditions rather than incoming alien death machines. Looks like the Zephyrians are redecorating the eastern ridge again. They've got those crystal tower things sprouting up like particularly aggressive flowers. Riley adjusted his scope and confirmed the sighting, watching as elegant spires of what appeared to be living glass emerged from the rocky terrain with fluid grace that made human engineering look like children playing with building blocks. The enemy had a talent for making warfare look like performance art, which would have been more impressive if it wasn't so effectively lethal. Any sign of their usual morning poetry recital? He asked, referring to the Zephyrian habit of broadcasting elaborate verse before launching attacks that combined military strategy with interpretive dance. Not yet, Cap, replied Corporal Kai Okonkwo from the demolitions bunker, where he was carefully arranging explosive charges while humming what sounded like an ancient Earth lullaby. Though I did pick up some interesting harmonics on the quantum frequency bands. Either they're planning something special, or their commander is having another one of those artistic temperament episodes. The war against the Zephyrian Empire had been raging for 3 years, though raging might have been an overstatement for a conflict that often resembled a very deadly form of interactive theater. The aliens approached combat with a philosophical intensity that made traditional military doctrine look embarrassingly straightforward, treating each battle as an opportunity for cultural expression rather than simple territorial conquest. Riley's squad had earned a reputation for surviving encounters that should have been mathematically impossible, partly through superior tactics and mostly through Kai's talent for making things explode in creatively useful ways. They'd been assigned to hold position Delta 7, a strategically worthless piece of real estate that commanded an excellent view of absolutely nothing important, which meant it was exactly the kind of place where something significant was bound to happen. Movement on the southern approach, Vera reported, her voice carrying the professional calm that came from years of watching people through a rifle scope. Looks like a full ceremonial procession this time. They've got banners, floating crystals, and what appears to be a marching band made of living light. Riley sighed and reached for his tactical binoculars, knowing that Zephyrian ceremonial processions usually meant either very good news or very bad news, with no reliable way to distinguish between the two until after the shooting started. Through the enhanced optics, he could see the alien formation approaching with the measured precision of a funeral march, if funeral marches typically involved participants who could phase through solid matter at will. Intel suggests we're about to receive a visit from someone important, he announced to his squad. High Command thinks the Zephyrian Queen herself might be making a personal appearance. Kai's humming stopped abruptly. The Queen. The one who supposedly communicates through bioluminescent poetry and can rearrange matter with her thoughts. That would be the one, Riley confirmed, watching as the alien procession continued its stately advance across the battlefield. Though I'm hoping the reports about her ability to read minds through quantum entanglement were exaggerated for dramatic effect. Why would they send their queen to this particular patch of nothing? Vera asked, tracking the approaching formation through her scope while maintaining the conversational tone that made her such an effective sniper. We're not exactly defending anything strategic here. Riley had been wondering the same thing, though 3 years of fighting Zephyrians had taught him that their strategic thinking operated according to principles that made human military doctrine look like children's games. They seemed to choose battlefields based on aesthetic considerations as much as tactical advantages, and their concept of victory often involved criteria that had nothing to do with traditional territorial control. Maybe she heard about Kai's cooking, he suggested, trying to maintain squad morale through the time-honored military tradition of deflecting anxiety with inappropriate humor. Word gets around about decent food, even across interstellar distances. My field rations are legendary, Kai agreed seriously, though I'm not sure intergalactic fame was what I was aiming for when I figured out how to make the protein paste taste like actual food. The approaching procession had begun to emit harmonious tones that seemed to resonate through the ground itself, causing the scattered debris of previous battles to vibrate in sympathy with frequencies that existed just below the threshold of human hearing. Riley felt his teeth ache in response to the subsonic harmonics, a sensation that was becoming uncomfortably familiar after months of exposure to Zephyrian acoustic weapons. Energy readings are off the charts, Vera reported, her voice carrying a note of professional interest rather than alarm. Whatever they're bringing with them is generating quantum field fluctuations that are making our sensors very confused. Also, I think my rifle scope is trying to compose poetry. Riley checked his own equipment and confirmed that several instruments were displaying readings that shouldn't have been possible according to any known laws of physics. The Zephyrians had a talent for making reality behave in ways that violated basic scientific principles, apparently through the simple expedient of asking it politely to reconsider its fundamental properties. Incoming transmission, Kai announced, adjusting his communications array with the careful precision of someone who understood that alien technology required a delicate touch and occasional bribery with caffeinated beverages. They're broadcasting on multiple frequencies simultaneously, and the translation matrix is having what appears to be an artistic crisis. The message that emerged from the static was delivered in the melodious voice that had become familiar to every human soldier on Kepler 442b, though this time it carried harmonics that made the air itself seem to shimmer with barely contained energy. "Greetings, warriors of Earth," the voice announced, each word accompanied by visual displays that painted meaning directly onto the listener's consciousness. "The Eternal Queen Lireleth approaches your position with the intent of conducting what your language would translate as a selection ceremony, though the concept encompasses implications that transcend simple linguistic interpretation." Riley exchanged glances with his squad, all of whom had developed the 1,000-yard stare that came from prolonged exposure to alien communication protocols that treated every conversation as an opportunity for philosophical discourse. "A selection ceremony for what?" he muttered, though he suspected asking for clarification would result in an hour-long lecture about the metaphysical implications of choice in a quantum universe. The alien procession had reached the base of the ridge where position Delta 7 clung to the rocky terrain like a particularly stubborn barnacle. Through his binoculars, Riley could see individual Zephyrians moving with the fluid grace of beings who had never doubted their place in the cosmic order, their bioluminescent armor pulsing with patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Contact front," Vera announced unnecessarily, since the approaching aliens were now impossible to miss. Though I should mention that they're not broadcasting any hostile intentions. In fact, they seem to be in what I can only describe as a celebratory mood. Riley had learned to distrust Zephyrian celebrations, which tended to involve reality-altering displays that left human observers questioning their fundamental assumptions about the nature of existence. The last time the aliens had thrown a party, half his squad had spent 3 days convinced they were living inside a philosophical thought experiment. "All positions, maintain defensive posture but hold fire unless directly threatened," he ordered, knowing that opening hostilities against a Zephyrian queen would probably result in consequences that would make their current situation look like a relaxing vacation. As the alien formation reached the perimeter of position Delta 7, Riley found himself face to face with beings whose very presence seemed to alter the local space-time continuum in ways that made his head hurt and his coffee taste even worse than usual. The Zephyrian Queen's arrival transformed the battlefield into something that belonged in an art gallery rather than a military engagement zone, assuming art galleries typically featured installations capable of bending spacetime around themselves for dramatic effect. Queen Lireleth emerged from what Riley had initially assumed was a transport vehicle but now realized was actually a living creature the size of a small building, its crystalline shell opening like a flower to reveal an interior that seemed to contain more space than physics should have allowed. "Well," Kai observed with characteristic understatement, "that's definitely not standard military transport protocol." The Queen herself defied every expectation Riley had formed about alien royalty based on 3 years of combat experience. Instead of the imposing warrior empress he'd anticipated, Lireleth appeared almost delicate, her elongated ears swept back like elegant wings while her bioluminescent armor pulsed with patterns that suggested she was conducting an orchestra only she could hear. When she moved, reality seemed to adjust itself around her, as if the universe was constantly making small corrections to accommodate her presence. "Attention, defenders of this strategically irrelevant position," her voice carried across the battlefield without any apparent need for amplification, each word accompanied by visual harmonics that painted meaning directly onto the listener's consciousness. "We request a temporary cessation of hostilities for the purpose of conducting proper introductions and exchanging cultural perspectives." Vera's voice crackled through the comm system with a dry tone that indicated she was processing information that didn't fit into any known tactical framework. "Cap, they're not just requesting a ceasefire. They're setting up what appears to be a reception area complete with refreshment stations and atmospheric mood enhancement devices." Riley watched through his binoculars as the Zephyrian retinue began constructing elaborate crystalline structures that grew directly from the planet's surface, their forms shifting and evolving as if guided by aesthetic principles rather than engineering requirements. Within minutes, the barren battlefield had been transformed into something resembling an elegant outdoor theater, complete with seating arrangements that somehow managed to accommodate both human and alien physiological requirements. "Should we be concerned that they know our furniture preferences?" Kai asked, studying the human-sized chairs that had spontaneously manifested from what had previously been bare rock. "Because I'm pretty sure that level of reconnaissance capability wasn't mentioned in our intelligence briefings." "Our intelligence briefings also failed to mention that the enemy treats warfare like performance art," Riley replied, making command decisions based on 3 years of experience with situations that no military academy had prepared him for. "All units, stand down to yellow alert and prepare to receive guests. And somebody please tell me our coffee supplies are adequate for entertaining alien royalty." The Queen's approach to diplomacy apparently involved converting military positions into social venues, which would have been charming if it wasn't so thoroughly unsettling. Her retinue included beings whose job descriptions seemed to combine traditional military roles with interpretive dance, resulting in guards who could probably disintegrate targets while composing epic poetry about the experience. "Incoming delegation," Vera reported, tracking the approaching aliens through her scope with professional interest. Lead elements include what appear to be warrior poets, bioengineers, and someone whose armor is generating quantum field fluctuations that are making my targeting system write haikus. Riley checked his own equipment and confirmed that several instruments were indeed producing text output in various poetic forms, apparently in response to exposure to Zephyrian quantum signatures. His tactical display was currently showing troop movements in the form of an epic ballad, which was both informative and deeply concerning from a cybersecurity perspective. Queen Lyrilleth had reached the edge of position Delta 7, her presence causing spontaneous improvements to the local environment that made the war-torn landscape look almost habitable. Flowers were beginning to bloom from cracks in the concrete, and the air itself seemed cleaner, as if her bioluminescent armor was conducting atmospheric purification as a casual side effect. "Greetings, Captain Riley Novak of the Terran Defense Corps," she said, her melodious voice carrying information that should have been impossible for her to possess. "Your reputation for maintaining squad morale under impossible circumstances has reached even our most distant monitoring stations." The fact that she knew his name and apparent psychological profile suggested surveillance capabilities that made human intelligence gathering look like children playing spy games with tin cans and string. Riley maintained his composure through the time-honored military tradition of acting as if impossible situations were merely mildly inconvenient administrative complications. "Your Majesty," he replied, defaulting to formal protocols while internally wondering if there was proper etiquette for addressing alien queens who materialized on battlefields with construction crews and catering services. "Welcome to position Delta 7. I'm afraid our accommodations are somewhat limited, but we'd be happy to share what hospitality we can offer." Lyrilleth's laugh was like crystal chimes in a solar wind, beautiful and somehow cutting at the same time. "Your hospitality is precisely what we came to evaluate, Captain. Though I confess our assessment criteria may differ from your expectations." Her retinue had begun setting up what appeared to be monitoring equipment, though their devices resembled musical instruments more than traditional sensors. One particularly elaborate construct was generating holographic displays that showed real-time analysis of human emotional states, complete with color-coded indicators that suggested the Zephyrians were conducting some form of psychological evaluation disguised as a social visit. "If I may ask, Your Majesty," Riley said carefully, "what exactly are you evaluating us for?" "Compatibility," she replied, her elongated ears twitching with what might have been amusement. "The Zephyrian Collective has been observing human military units for the duration of this conflict, searching for individuals who demonstrate specific psychological characteristics that our species finds intriguing." Kai's voice emerged from the comm system with the tone of someone who was beginning to suspect this conversation was heading in directions that no amount of explosives training had prepared him for. "Cap, are we being recruited for something, or is this the galaxy's most elaborate job interview?" The Queen's bioluminescent armor pulsed with patterns that suggested she had heard the question and found it amusing. "Your demolitions expert demonstrates admirable directness," she observed. "Though I suspect he underestimates the complexity of the position we're considering him and his colleagues for." Riley felt the familiar sensation of a situation spiraling beyond the boundaries of normal military protocol and into territory that would require either exceptional creativity or very good insurance coverage. What kind of position requires a 3-year combat evaluation? "The kind that involves saving multiple civilizations from existential threats that cannot be resolved through conventional military methods," Lireleth replied with the casual tone of someone discussing weather patterns rather than cosmic-scale emergencies. "The Zephyrian Empire has been searching for humans who possess what we term adaptive consciousness, the ability to maintain hope, humor, and compassion under conditions that would drive most sentient beings to despair." Vera's voice crackled through the calm with the dry observation that indicated she was processing tactical information in real time. "So the entire war has been a job interview, and we've been unknowingly auditioning for positions as intergalactic problem solvers." "An elegantly concise summary," the Queen confirmed. "Though I should mention that the interview process is not yet complete. The final selection requires direct evaluation of candidate responses to unexpected social dynamics." Riley was beginning to understand that position Delta 7 had been chosen not for its strategic value but for its isolation, providing an ideal testing environment where human military units could be observed without external interference. The realization that every battle, every tactical decision, and every moment of squad interaction had been monitored and analyzed by alien observers was both flattering and deeply unsettling. "Your Majesty," he said slowly, "when you say, final selection, are you implying that this evaluation will determine which humans are chosen for whatever mission you have in mind?" Lireleth's smile carried implications that extended far beyond simple amusement. "The selection process, Captain Novak, is about to begin in earnest. And I suspect you will find it quite unlike anything your military training prepared you for." The selection ceremony began with Queen Lireleth raising her hands toward the alien sky, her bioluminescent armor suddenly blazing with patterns so complex they seemed to contain their own internal logic. The effect was immediate and disorienting. Every human soldier within a 5-kilometer radius found themselves standing in perfect formation without any memory of how they had moved from their defensive positions to the crystalline amphitheater that now dominated the landscape. "Please remain calm," the Queen's voice resonated through bioacoustic amplifiers that made the air itself sing, "while we conduct what your military protocols would classify as an unconventional personnel review." Riley found himself in the front rank of what appeared to be several thousand human soldiers, all arranged in neat rows that formed geometric patterns visible only from above. Behind him, he could hear Kai muttering calculations under his breath, apparently trying to determine whether the formation's mathematical precision was architecturally significant or just alien showmanship. "Cap," Vera's voice whispered through a private comm channel, "my scope's targeting system has been replaced with what appears to be a poetry generator, and it's currently composing verses about the philosophical implications of free will versus predetermined destiny." "At least your equipment is being philosophical about the situation," Riley replied quietly, watching as Queen Lireleth began walking through the ranks of assembled soldiers with the measured pace of someone conducting a very thorough inspection. My tactical display is showing our current predicament as an interpretive dance sequence. The Queen moved with fluid grace that seemed to bend light around her, her elongated ears twitching as she evaluated each soldier through methods that apparently involved scanning their dreams, measuring their capacity for hope, and assessing their ability to find humor in desperate circumstances. Her retinue followed at a respectful distance, their own bioluminescent armor pulsing in synchronized patterns that suggested they were conducting some form of collective analysis. Fascinating, Lireleth murmured as she paused in front of a demolition specialist whose psychological profile apparently contained unexpected depths. This individual has maintained optimism despite witnessing 17 separate reality alteration events that should have induced existential crisis. His coping mechanism appears to involve treating cosmic mysteries as engineering problems that can be solved through proper application of controlled explosions. Riley watched the selection process with growing understanding that the Zephyrians weren't evaluating traditional military capabilities but something far more fundamental about human psychological resilience. They seemed particularly interested in soldiers who had developed creative responses to impossible situations, as if the ability to find solutions outside conventional parameters was more valuable than tactical expertise. Your species demonstrates remarkable adaptability, the Queen observed as she continued her inspection, her voice carrying harmonics that painted meaning directly onto the listener's consciousness. Most civilizations we encounter become paralyzed when faced with phenomena that contradict their understanding of reality. Humans, however, appear to treat such encounters as interesting puzzles rather than existential threats. She stopped in front of a communications officer whose equipment had been spontaneously generating poetry for the past 6 months, apparently in response to prolonged exposure to Zephyrian quantum signatures. "Tell me, Specialist Rodriguez," she said, somehow knowing his name without any apparent access to personnel records, "how did you respond when your radio began composing epic verses instead of transmitting tactical information?" Rodriguez straightened to attention with the automatic precision of someone who had spent years dealing with equipment that refused to behave according to specifications. "Ma'am, I learned to translate the poetry back into useful intelligence data and discovered that metaphorical language actually conveys tactical information more efficiently than standard military terminology." An elegant adaptation, Lireleth approved, her armor pulsing with patterns that suggested genuine admiration. "You transformed a communications breakdown into an enhancement of information transfer capabilities. Such cognitive flexibility is precisely what we seek." As the Queen continued her evaluation, Riley began to understand that the 3-year war had been designed as an elaborate psychological screening process. Every battle, every impossible situation, every reality-warping encounter had been carefully orchestrated to identify humans who possessed the specific mental characteristics the Zephyrians required for whatever mission they had in mind. "Captain Novak," the Queen said suddenly, her attention focusing on him with an intensity that made the air around them shimmer with barely contained energy. "Your psychological profile indicates that you have maintained squad cohesion and morale despite being assigned to defend strategically worthless positions against enemies who treat warfare as performance art. How do you account for this achievement?" Riley considered the question carefully, aware that his answer would likely determine not only his own fate but that of his entire squad. "Your Majesty, I've found that focusing on practical problems, like keeping everyone fed, maintaining equipment, and ensuring adequate coffee supplies, helps prevent existential crises when faced with situations that don't make sense according to conventional logic." "Coffee," she repeated, her elongated ears twitching with what was definitely amusement. "Your species' approach to cosmic mysteries consistently involves the prioritization of caffeinated beverages." "Good coffee makes everything else manageable," Riley confirmed seriously. "Even alien queens conducting mysterious selection ceremonies on battlefields that shouldn't exist according to the laws of physics." Lireleth's laugh was like crystal chimes in a solar wind, though this time it carried genuine warmth rather than cutting superiority. "Your ability to find practical solutions to impossible problems while maintaining humor in desperate circumstances is exactly what the Zephyrian collective requires, Captain." She turned to address the assembled soldiers, her voice carrying across the crystalline amphitheater with authority that seemed to resonate through dimensions beyond the merely physical. The selection process has revealed what we hope to discover: humans who possess adaptive consciousness, the ability to thrive in situations that would paralyze species dependent on rigid logical frameworks. Kai's voice crackled through the comm system with the tone of someone who was beginning to understand implications that extended far beyond normal military operations. "Ma'am, are you saying we've been recruited for something that requires dealing with problems that don't have logical solutions?" "Precisely, Corporal Okonkwo," the Queen replied, apparently monitoring their private communications with the casual ease of someone who considered privacy a quaint human concept. "The Zephyrian Empire faces threats that cannot be resolved through traditional military methods or conventional scientific approaches. We require allies who can find hope in hopeless situations and create solutions from seemingly impossible circumstances." Riley felt the weight of implications settling around him like tactical gear designed for missions that exceeded all previous parameters. "Your Majesty, what kind of threats require a 3-year evaluation process to identify suitable personnel?" Lyriletha's bioluminescent armor shifted to patterns that suggested she was about to reveal information that would fundamentally alter their understanding of the galactic situation. "The kind that threaten the existence of consciousness itself, Captain. And the kind that can only be defeated by species who have learned to treat the impossible as merely inconvenient." The crystalline amphitheater fell silent as the assembled soldiers processed the realization that their recruitment into something far larger than planetary warfare was no longer a possibility but an imminent reality. Riley looked around at his squad, seeing in their expressions the same mixture of apprehension and determination that had carried them through 3 years of impossible battles. "When do we start?" he asked, because asking about insurance coverage seemed inappropriate when discussing the salvation of consciousness itself. The moment of final selection arrived with Queen Lyrileth walking directly toward Riley's position, her elongated ears swept back as she moved through the ranks of assembled soldiers with the purposeful stride of someone who had already made a decision that would reshape multiple destinies. The crystalline amphitheater fell silent except for the harmonic resonance of Zephyrian technology and the distant sound of what might have been the universe itself holding its breath. "Captain Riley Novak," she announced, her melodious voice carrying across the assembled formation with authority that seemed to bend spacetime around itself, "from among thousands of warriors who have demonstrated exceptional courage and tactical brilliance, you are the individual I choose to lead humanity's contribution to our joint mission." Riley felt the weight of several thousand pairs of eyes focusing on him as the implications of the Queen's selection began to register. The soldiers around him maintained perfect formation, though he could sense the mixture of surprise, curiosity, and perhaps relief that they weren't being singled out for whatever impossible assignment was about to be revealed. "Your Majesty," he replied, his voice carrying the steady tone that had kept his squad functional through 3 years of reality-defying combat, "I'm honored by your selection, though I should mention that my greatest achievements have been the result of excellent teamwork rather than individual brilliance." Lyriletha's bioluminescent armor pulsed with patterns that suggested she had anticipated this response and found it confirmation of her choice. "Your immediate concern for your subordinates' welfare, even when facing personal advancement to a position of unprecedented responsibility, demonstrates exactly the psychological characteristics we require." She gestured gracefully, and suddenly the air around them shimmered with holographic displays showing star charts, threat assessments, and what appeared to be tactical analyses of cosmic phenomena that exceeded human understanding. The information was overwhelming in scope but somehow remained comprehensible, as if the Zephyrian technology was translating concepts that existed beyond normal language into forms human consciousness could process. "The threat we face," the Queen continued, "originates from entities that exist between dimensions, consuming consciousness itself as a form of sustenance. They have already devoured 17 civilizations, leaving behind empty space where sentient thought once flourished. Traditional military responses have proven ineffective because these beings cannot be fought through conventional means." Kai's voice emerged from the comm system with the careful tone of someone asking questions about problems that definitely weren't covered in standard demolitions training. "Ma'am, when you say they consume consciousness, do you mean they're literally eating thoughts, or is this more of a metaphysical consumption situation?" "Both," Lyrileth replied with the matter-of-fact delivery of someone discussing routine maintenance procedures rather than cosmic-scale existential threats. They drain the capacity for sentient experience from their victims, leaving behind beings who retain physical form but lose all ability to think, feel, or perceive meaning in existence. The holographic displays shifted to show recordings of the aftermath of such attacks, planets populated by beings who moved with mechanical precision but showed no signs of consciousness, their eyes empty of any spark that would indicate awareness or intelligence. The images were more unsettling than any conventional battlefield footage Riley had ever witnessed. The Zephyrian Empire's bioluminescent consciousness enhancement technology provides some protection, the Queen explained, but our defensive capabilities are insufficient against entities that can exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. We require allies who approach problem-solving through fundamentally different cognitive frameworks. Riley studied the tactical displays with growing understanding that this wasn't a conventional military briefing but an orientation for a mission that would require every unconventional skill his species had developed. Your Majesty, what makes you believe humans can succeed where other civilizations have failed? Your species' talent for finding hope in hopeless situations and creating solutions from impossible circumstances, she replied, her elongated ears twitching with what was definitely satisfaction. Most civilizations become paralyzed when faced with threats that contradict their understanding of reality. Humans, however, treat such encounters as interesting puzzles that can be solved through creative application of practical principles. Vera's voice crackled through the comm system with a dry observation that indicated she was processing strategic information in real time. So we're being recruited because we're too stubborn to accept that some problems are unsolvable. An accurate assessment, Lireleth confirmed. Your psychological resilience, combined with your species' unique approach to consciousness quantum field integration, may provide the key to developing effective countermeasures against entities that exist beyond conventional dimensional parameters. The mention of consciousness quantum field integration reminded Riley of reports he'd heard about human soldiers whose equipment had begun exhibiting impossible capabilities after prolonged exposure to Zephyrian technology. His own tactical display had been generating poetry for months, apparently in response to quantum signatures that shouldn't have been detectable by human-designed sensors. Captain, the Queen continued, your selection as mission commander comes with the authority to choose your own support staff from among the available personnel. I understand that human military effectiveness depends heavily on established unit cohesion. Riley looked around at the assembled soldiers, his gaze settling on Kai and Vera, who had shared 3 years of impossible battles while maintaining the kind of professional competence that made survival possible in situations where survival shouldn't have been an option. The decision was obvious, though the implications were staggering. Your Majesty, I request permission to include Corporal Kai Okonkwo and Sergeant Vera Chen in the mission team, he announced. Their skills in demolitions and tactical analysis will be essential for any operation involving unconventional problem-solving. An excellent choice, Lireleth approved, her bioluminescent armor shifting to patterns that suggested the formal recruitment process was nearing completion. Corporal Okonkwo's talent for treating cosmic mysteries as engineering problems and Sergeant Chen's ability to maintain tactical awareness during reality alteration events will be invaluable assets. Kai's voice emerged from the comm system with the tone of someone who was beginning to understand that his career in controlled explosions was about to take a dramatic turn toward interdimensional warfare. Ma'am, will this mission involve the kind of problems that can be solved by making things explode in creative ways? Almost certainly, the Queen replied with what was definitely amusement. Though I suspect your definition of things will require significant expansion to include abstract concepts and non-corporeal entities. Riley felt the familiar sensation of a situation expanding beyond all previous parameters while somehow remaining manageable through the simple expedient of focusing on practical considerations. Your Majesty, when do we begin, and will adequate coffee supplies be provided? Liraletha's laugh was like crystal chimes in a solar wind, though this time it carried genuine warmth and perhaps a hint of relief that humanity's representatives were approaching cosmic-scale responsibility with characteristic practicality. Immediately, Captain Novak, she replied, gesturing toward her crystalline ship, which had begun reconfiguring itself to accommodate human passengers. And yes, we have made extensive preparations to ensure that your species' caffeine requirements are met. The fate of consciousness itself may depend on maintaining optimal human cognitive function. As Riley and his squad prepared to board the alien vessel, he reflected that his promotion from tactical commander to intergalactic diplomat had come with better benefits than expected, even if the job description included responsibilities that no military academy had prepared him for. The final image that would stay with him was Queen Lyriletha's expression of quiet satisfaction as she watched humans approach the salvation of the galaxy as just another mission that would require good teamwork, creative problem-solving, and excellent coffee.